What if I told you that the biggest risk to your kid scoring a high SAT or ACT score is not the test itself? It's the quiet belief that you're supposed to wait until 10th grade to start. And I know for many of you that were planning to do this in 10th grade, you thought, well, that was earlier than everyone else doing it in 11th and 12th. 10th grade can still put unnecessary pressure on your student as they're trying to manage everything else. Students who have the raw ability to earn scores in the 90th percentile end up stuck 20 or 30 points shorter than where they needed to be, leaving tens of thousands of dollars in merit scholarships on the table, disqualifying themselves from consideration in selective programs. Not because they weren't brilliant, but because the testing timing strategy that was employed was not the most effective. So as test optional policies are rolling back, the families that are suffering the most are not the families who don't care. They're the ones whose families waited until the calendar says it's time. In this conversation, I want to show you a different timeline. Taking low stakes diagnostics in middle school, treating the SAT and ACT as their own skills and subjects to master. By the end of this conversation, you're going to understand exactly what this test comeback actually means for your student. And you'll walk away with a middle school centered systems map. And if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I'm really excited to dive into how to strategically fit in standardized test prep, but you also know that you want the holistic roadmap to ensuring that your student stands out in the admissions process, I want you to get access to my complimentary on-demand training before 9th grade, the non-negotiable leadership blueprint that every student needs to have that advantage for selective admissions and merit scholarships. So if you get nothing else from this video, this is what I need you to hear. If you wait to figure out the test prep and to take the first diagnostic to figure out what your student actually needs to study, you've now traded your student's greatest asset for a pre-qualification box. When we allow test prep to take up the critical time and energy that our students need to execute on their leadership initiatives and the other extracurriculars that they have that they know are leading to their differentiation, we now essentially compromise the opportunity for them to create the biggest impact in their 10th and 11th grade years. This is also the time when our students are taking their first AP classes. Course rigor is intensifying. So to add test prep in addition to this truly does take away critical time. Now, it is totally fine if your student is still studying for the SAT or ACT in 10th grade. We want to take the diagnostic sooner rather than later so we can really get a sense of what is the baseline that we're going to be working from. For some of our students, when they take that baseline in 7th or 8th grade, we find that their scores are a lot higher than they might have thought. This actually brings a lot of peace to our families because now they're saying to themselves, oh, I'm not going to need to spend all this time to support my student in test prep. That's really already locked in. We only need maybe a few hours of dedicated time. For other students, they're actually scoring much lower than what we would expect from a student even in middle school taking the standardized test. And that lets us know, no problem. We just need to make sure that we're intentionally scaffolding that time and energy up front. Because the middle school years are the time of exploration, the advantage of starting early is that your student can literally be dedicating 30 minutes per week or even an hour per month, and they are still going to have a much greater advantage to that student that started in 10th grade. Why? Because if you're taking the diagnostic in, let's say, 8th grade, for example, you now have at 1 hour per month, 12 hours in advantage. And you might say, okay, well, that can easily be done in a weekend in 10th grade or 11th grade. But when you think about practically your student's schedule in 10th or 11th grade, you have to ask yourself, are they really going to have the time and capacity to set aside 12 hours? A lot of families will say, okay, well, we're going to do it in the summer. That's extremely, extremely common. We're setting ourselves up and our kids up for a greater risk to not maximize their potential. Because even if you are taking that diagnostic, let's say in the summer of 10th, but now your student is scoring in a very, very low percentile, even though you did maybe set aside that entire summer to study, they're not necessarily going to be able to max out on their potential. Taking the diagnostic as early as possible simply allows us to get a realistic sense of how much time they're going to need. In our program, we've literally locked this into a formula, how many hours they need to study to hit their target scores for their target schools. This allows us to really truly create a multi-year roadmap where we can say, these are the times that you're going to dedicate to the standardized test prep and the coaching there. These are the times where we want to spend more energy and effort into the leadership project. These are the times where maybe you need to double down on your grades because now you're taking more APs than you ever have. We're actually able to zoom out and create a realistic plan. A lot of families are going through the motions and letting things unfold, just checking off the next thing that seems like the most important thing to do, rather than zooming out and strategically scaffolding a framework for where everything is going to fit that's actually rooted in real data. So we've literally laid out a financial model for their time where we're able to leverage those highest value years for the greatest value assets. My second point is that starting early allows us to surface any unexpected blocks for our students, whether emotional or skill-based, early on. A lot of our students in our program suffer from test anxiety. And in the classroom, in many cases, the parents are able to negotiate for their students to have extended time. However, for kids that may not have a formal diagnosis that would give them that extended time on standardized tests, they don't often get the opportunity to work through the emotional, mental blocks that are causing the test anxiety. When we cram that test script in 10th or 11th grade, we thought that that time was just going to be spent on improving the score, but there's a huge emotional and mental block to our students actually doing the work to improve the score. So taking that early diagnostic allows us to see upfront which of our students are actually suffering from test anxiety or any other critical study-based habits that would actually unlock more momentum when they actually take the time to study. So for our students taking that diagnostic, even if they're not aggressively studying for the test until 10th grade, it still gives us the opportunity to flag those other issues. When we've done that early, we can now address, for example, test anxiety early on outside of the context of the standardized test, because we know when they come back to standardized testing, that's already something that we've addressed in a different manner, in a different way. So it allows the student to then feel like the stakes are lower when they're actually coming to study for the test. And this is exactly why I created our on-demand complementary training before 9th grade, the non-negotiable leadership advantage that every student needs to start implementing before 9th grade. It's going to allow you to understand how this test prep strategy deeply aligns with the greatest differentiator for college admissions, and that is leadership.
Go get it with the link below.
Period. That was fire. All right, now end the video. So if I haven't made it already abundantly clear, when I say start early and start in 7th and 8th grade, we're not talking about grinding out SAT booklets. Not childhood, that's anxiety with a Scantron, and that's not what we're about. You want to build 4 quiet systems using schoolwork that make test prep later feel like applying a skill rather than surviving a boot camp. System number 1 is reading stamina, being able to go long stretches reading multi-paragraph nonfiction without panicking, freaking out, or getting bored. For a lot of students, the SAT and ACT reading sections are truly a challenge because they did not have the habit of reading text similar outside of that context. So the first time a lot of our students are doing that in a time-constrained format is in studying for the SAT and ACT, and these are skills that can be easily built over years. So the goal here is to support your student in developing a habit of deep reading. Even 20 minutes per day while they're still in 7th and 8th grade is going to set them up worlds apart to students that were using those 20 minutes every week to scroll. When they get to 10th grade, that habit of scrolling has now accumulated to an inability to truly have the stamina required on standardized test prep. System number 2 is weekly accuracy labs. This is where you want to treat something at home, a homework set, like an actual test lab. They circle the questions that they feel unsure about. They finish, they go back and ask, where did my thinking slip? Not, why am I bad at this? A lot of students, when they're doing homework, are simply going through the motions. They're not actually asking themselves, why did I answer the question this way? Where am I actually experiencing friction? They just submit their homework to the teacher, expect it to be graded, review those wrong responses, and move on. As our students grow and progress, their ability to self-correct is a critical skill that's going to make the difference in not only their performance on standardized testing, but in college when they get there years to come. And this is a habit that we can be scaffolding right now in middle school. As they get that insight that is coming from that skill of metacognition, you want them to actually keeping a log of that so they can start to see habits around their behaviors. Their ability to self-correct is going to be make or break to improve their standardized testing score. Because the most critical element of improving, it's not just doing more questions, it's actually getting stronger at understanding why you answered the way you answered. Most students are not equipped to ask themselves those questions. They don't have that discipline. They have not been working that muscle. That's why parents end up spending thousands of dollars in test prep down the line. And in many cases, the money doesn't even translate to a higher score because the test prep company is trying to give your students more strategies and hacks not actually growing them in the skill of metacognition that would empower them to study without needing those tutors. It was this exact strategy that saved my family thousands of dollars. I was actually able to self-study for the test because I was able to apply this skill to my test prep. If you'd like a video on how students can actually self-study for the standardized testing, strengthen their metacognition skills, comment META in the description and I'll be happy to make a video, META. The third system is error review habits. This is where our students get really strong on analyzing why they got something wrong. The previous system, we were talking about how are they approaching things, how are they thinking about things. In this system, we're helping them get really clear on the types of wrong answers. The wrong answer that they get could be a content gap. It could be a skill gap. It could be an applied knowledge gap. There are different skills in the realm of a wrong answer. 6 out of 10 for another student, depending on the specific types of gaps that they're experiencing. This can be applied to quizzes, tests, anything that your student is getting graded. You guys can start applying the system right now. This system is going to directly apply to when you're actually studying for the SAT and the ACT. So it's really cool because all these three systems we just talked about have nothing to do with actually studying for the SAT and ACT. This is really what we're talking about when we say start test prep early. System number 4 is time management systems. Now, if you have a student that is already excellent at time management, go ahead and skip this system. But for a lot of high achieving students, they might still be in the habit of getting things done last minute. They're still getting great and showing up really well in school, really great feedback from teachers. And yet there are some underlying habits where you kind of see some procrastination or maybe a negative attitude around a certain subject where they kind of just feel like I'm not good at this, some like identity level things. These are things that can signal that there's an opportunity to improve the larger time management system. Oftentimes when there is friction in doing things in a more proactive manner rather than last minute, there's something underlying going on that's leading to the procrastination. Supporting your student and starting to build time management systems is going to be really, really critical when you actually set up a test prep study system. As you are implementing those time management habits and systems for them, when they're experiencing friction with that system, this is the perfect time to get to the underlying roots of why that friction is there. That way, when you get to your test prep phase, whenever you do decide to do it, you actually know these are my students' strengths and weaknesses as it relates to time management, so we can actually build a test prep plan that's realistic to them. At this point, test prep then becomes using muscles that they've already strengthened in a different format. At the end of the day, test prep is just one small part of the overall strategy for selective admissions and merit scholarships. As I've said in this video, it is truly the pre-qualification. That being said, you want to go ahead and get my complimentary on-demand training if you haven't copped it already before 9th grade, the non-negotiable leadership advantage that our students need. In order to secure selective admissions and merit scholarships, the strategy needs to start before 9th grade if you're really going to do it from a place that is intrinsically motivated by your student, authentic, it actually aligns with who they are, it's lived identity, rather than a performative checkbox, because we're very anti-performance over here. All right, Brielle, so where can they get the on-demand training?
The link into the description.
What happens if they don't get it?
Your kids are gonna start like, and they're gonna be like, "Mommy, help me!"
That's wisdom.
We love you. We will see you in the next video.
Peace.
And everything that's coming from